Up here in the North Country, I've been wearing this for the past 4 months. And I tell you what, I'm sick of it. No more. That's much better. Spring is in the air here in the Northern realm, and something I want to talk to you guys about is not 5 top baits, but the 6 top baits to use in not only Minnesota, but throughout the Midwest. And why 6? Because 5 isn't enough. You've always got to have that +1, baby. Let's go, tag along. Top 6 baits for springtime fishing in the Northern Midwest, bass predator style. Let's go into number 1 bait, and that's going to be the Wacky rigged senko or stick style worm. Couple tricks, couple tips, and a couple styles. Number 1, I love the Yum Dinger, and in Minnesota especially when you're in that super clear water or you're farther up north, Midwest places, the 4-inch just kills. I don't know what the deal is, but I throw a 4-inch and a 5-inch. Luke and I both throw it. We throw it exclusively now after the last couple of years on the VMC size 1 Neko hook. And I throw the one that doesn't have the keeper most of the time, because it's pretty clear water, sand, back pockets, you know, fishing in some, you know, around stumps, things like that. You're not around a lot of grass, so the open exposed hook rigged right down the center, you know, that Wacky rig is the way to go. But as of years, you know, last year they came out with that same VMC Neko hook with that fluorocarbon weed guard on it. I've started throwing that one a ton just because you never get any little debris and grass and things on it. So those are the 2 that I throw. And something that we always do to conserve baits is get yourself one of these O-ring little bait deals, right? Something you can do with this thing is take a Sharpie marker as well, pop the back plastic end off of a Sharpie marker and put a screw right down the back of it, and you can make one of these yourself for freaking 50 cents, or you can buy them on Tackle Warehouse, Bass Pro, everywhere carries them. But just a little tool that you can keep your O-rings, and the way it works is you just take your stick worm, slide it into the O-ring device, right? And then you got your O-rings popped up there, and you just slide those bad boys down. Slide it right down the bait, or right down the tube there, and I want to pop the O-ring about mid-center of that Wacky rig. Now that I got that thing centered on the Wacky rig, I take my VMC size 1 Neko, take my stick worm, I love the Yum Dinger, Gary Yamamoto, Senko's the classic, and then I literally just rig it underneath the plastic and underneath the ring, right through the center, just like that. Right there. Little 4-inch stick worm, Senko, whatever you want to call it. I throw it on a spinning rod, throw it with 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, and I usually like to go leader to braid just to get a little extra good hook set on that braid. I usually throw an 8 or 10-pound braid, but I throw it on a spinning rod. I urge you, you've got to throw it on a spinning rod, so much more distance. You can skip it under docks, throw it on beds. This is the #1 bite getting bait in the springtime by far. If you're a beginner, if you're an expert, I don't care who you are, arguably one of the best bass lures of all time. But throw that 4-inch in the spring, you get a lot more bites, and you get big ones on it too. And I throw 2 colors, keep it really simple, black or green pumpkin. That's it. Don't mess around with anything else, black or green pumpkin. Occasionally you get those bright pinks and yellows and chartreuses that throw in there on the spawning. But if you had to pick 2, black and green pumpkin. Experiment with 4-inch or 5-inch, because certain days they want one versus the other. There was one day when I started with a 5 and Luke had a 4. I'm not kidding, he caught 15-2 ratio. As soon as I switched to the 4-inch, it was night and day difference. So #1 bait, Wacky rigged stick worm Senko with that 1/0 VMC Neko hook, O-ring in the center. You're gonna catch a boatload of fish in the spring on that bad boy. Number 2 bait to throw in the spring, and honestly this is close to #1. If I could tie #1s I would. The Suspending Jerkbait. And for me and Luke, it's got to be the Rapala Shadow Rap. This bait is a really slow sink. Love this bait on the early side of spring, pre-spawn, through the spawn. A suspending jerkbait, there's no better bait at getting a core reaction out of a bass. And we've seen them in the gin clear water where you're working the bait, pause it, stop it, stop it. and you can get them to turn and eat these baits. And the way I work with suspending jerkbait is you bomb it out there, give it 1 or 2 or 3 cranks to get it down 3 or 4 feet, and it's a pop, pop, pause, rip, rip, pause. And the pause is the key. The rip isn't as important. The rip is to draw them in. The pause is what makes them eat. So picture that bait, just rip, rip with the rod tip, pop, pop. You're gonna slack it, slack line pop it, pop, pop, and let that thing sit. And as it's sitting in the water, this Rapala one will slowly sink, really slow. And it's just a secondary action. It kind of just shimmies and falls. And that pause, they eat it almost every time on the pause. I gotta say, it's 99% of the bites on a suspending jerkbait are on the pause. And there's no better bait at triggering just a core reactive strike in the spring. Try that Rapala Shadow Rap out. You're gonna love it. This is one of my favorite colors for largemouth. That's I want to say it's elite blue, but it's got a really nice smoky side, orange belly, little blue on the top. But a couple of the other ones I love, you know, you can go old school classic. Rapala Husky Jerk. This is the 4.5 inch size. It's just an awesome bait. Glass or ghost minnow color, something in that clear water that's really good. I also really like just a Rapala XRap. I mean, this bait slashes really hard. I throw this one later in the spring, you know, post spawn, even through summer. This bait just slashes hard, but all about that pause and all about popping it on a slack line. And one thing that's really key to jerkbait fishing is the right rod combo. You have to throw it on a medium action, medium power, fast action rod. The medium allows you, when you fight the fish, it's not pulling the hooks out because they're light wire hooks. And that fast action allows you to really get that action into the rod that you need. And always pop slack. Never pull the bait. You don't want that bait doing this. You want that bait doing this. Never this, always this. And pause that thing and experiment with the pauses. Sometimes it's a 3-second pause, sometimes it's a 10-second pause. But experiment with the pause and you're gonna get a ton of bites. You know, and I carry a lot of different colors and sizes. I really like natural colors for clear water, but I've got some brighter colors like the pinks and the oranges and the chartreuses, even your fire tigers, perch patterns and things. The water gets a little dingier, it's clouder. But number 2, the jerkbait, and honestly it might be my favorite bait to throw in the spring, especially on the early side of spring when the water's cold. Number 3 on the list of spring baits to be throwing has got to be, you know, your skirted bass jigs. A couple of my favorites, I throw 2 styles. I throw your classic casting jig. This one specifically is an Outkast Juice Jig. For the last couple of years, this has been my go-to jig. Works around every piece of cover. You can skip it really good under docks. You can fish it on beds. You can fish it around grass. You can fish it on rock, wood. This is a really good all-around jig. And that's that Outkast Juice Jig, and specifically really like the green pumpkin colors. In the spring, crawfish and bluegills is what's trying to eat their eggs, and that's what they're feeding up on before they go in the spring. So I'm looking for green pumpkin colors. This one is a bluegill color. It's got the chartreuse orange and a little bit of blue, but mostly green pumpkin. So go with anything that's in the green pumpkin hues to represent the bait fish. The water's typically clear. And I also really like, when the water's really clear, is a Finesse jig. Something that has a more ball head shape, so you get more of a stand-up approach for more when you're dragging. I like this one when I'm skipping under docks and doing a little more hop, a little more aggressive approach. And I really like the Finesse jig when the bite is a little more finicky or they're locked on beds and I need a smaller profile. I throw the Finesse jig with a ball head and that Finesse cut on it. This one in specific is a E-Series Finesse jig made by Andy's Custom Jigs. Evan Evers actually won the classic on this bait a couple years back in this exact color. And this is a living rubber skirt, so for cold water it's good. It's got a nice, strong but a light wire hook, but that ball head and that Finesse cut skirt, that combo between that casting style jig and that Finesse jig, deadly 1-2 punch when you're going with jigs, bed fishing, target casting, skipping. And something that's key to it is the trailer. You have to have a good craft trailer on it. In the early side of the year, when it's real cold, you know, pre-spawn per se, I like something flappy, you know. I used to use a lot of these Zoom critter craws. I use a lot of the chunk bait. Striking makes a good one. We'll show you a couple of those, and I'll label a couple down in the description. So I really like more flap or more of this action, not as much kick, right? That's early, pre-spawn. I like that kind of that flappy style trailer. Not as much kick. And then later, once the spawn is in full swing, and then you get into post-spawn, I really like a lot of kick. So I really like a Zoom. Speed Craw is a really great trailer. There's a ton of good brands. Strike King Rage series are good ones. The Menace is good. The Rage Craw is good. A lot of good ones. And I straight thread that on there. So I'm taking the jig, the hook, and I'm taking the craw, and I'm going straight up on the bait, right through the center of the craw. And I'm threading it straight up onto the jig, just like that. And you've just got a mean, deadly approach. And I do that same trailer I match up on the Finesse and the casting jig. So number 3, guys, definitely is the jig. You're gonna get big bites on this one. You're gonna get a lot of bites on this one, and you can put it anywhere. Skip that thing, throw that thing deep into cover. You're gonna get a ton of bites on a jig. Number 3 bait for spring, Midwest, northern Minnesota fishing. Next up on the list, and this is probably one of the most fun baits to throw ever, and especially in the spring when they're up shallow, that's going to be a paddle tail swim bait. And a lot of guys call this size more finesse swim baiting, but here in the Midwest, they don't munch those big monster Cali style swim baits as good. We've got smaller fish up here and they're smaller baits, so the smaller finesse style swim baits rigged on a swim bait jig head are money. Not only for numbers of fish, but for big fish too. They just really react well to a paddle style swim bait. And some of the ones that I love, you know, the Storm 360 GT is a great one. We throw that a ton. That bait just runs great. What's nice about it is if you're a beginner, you're just getting into swim bait fishing, comes pre-rigged right out of the package, right on the jig head exposed hook, and you literally just cast that baby out as far as you possibly can and slow wind it in, right? It's all about the speed and cadence. Every once in a while, give it a little speed burst, but just slowly paddle that thing in. And I like to throw it in the bellies of backwater bays. You know, one of my best spots in the spring where we fish a ton is what we call the South Bay, and it's a big bowl-shaped bay. It's got about a 6-foot hole in the center with, you know, 1 foot of just shallow tapering bank. They spawn on the banks, and then the pre-spawn or post-spawn, they hold in that deep hole, and there's a little bit of grass that comes up 2 or 3 feet. And when you get a little bit of wind, you throw this swim bait, and it is unreal how good this bait works and outshines every other bait. But you've got to have the wind to make it work, and you're just reeling it right over the tops of the grass and popping it out. And the strikes are vicious, you know. And you got 2 options when it comes to rigging. My favorite, when the weeds aren't as thick in the spring like they typically are, is that exposed jig head where you just thread the bait straight up on the shank of the hook, run it perfectly straight, make sure you keep your straight, and just reeling that thing slow and steady with a couple speed bursts every once in a while. I also will rig them on your classic belly-weighted swim bait hooks, right? And this is typically a 5/0, 4 or 5/0 tends to be the right size for your 4 to 5 inch swim baits. I really like to throw, you know, a 3.8 Keitech. You know, pick your colors. I love the green pumpkins, your natural shad colors. It's really tough to beat these. If I was going to give you 2 recommendations, I'd say get a green pumpkin variation and then get your favorite shad imitator. There's so many good colors, but you're just looking at a bait fishy color and a bluegilly perchy color with the green pumpkin. So yeah, pick one of those 2 colors. I would recommend getting the Keitech FAT is a great one to start with, in the 3/8 up to the 4/8. Keep it in that range. Rig it on, you know, a 3/0 or a 4/0 exposed swim bait jig head, or a 4/0 or 5/0 swim bait hook with the belly weight. If you got more grass, go the belly weight. Less grass, go with the swim bait jig head. You know, but there's a lot of good options out there. Zoom Swim and Fluke is a really good one. Strike King makes a really good Rage Swimmer is a really good one. But Keitech, hard to beat the Keitechs, hard to beat the Storm 360s, hard to beat the Strike Kings. But green pumpkin and shad, natural bait fish colors, you're going to catch a ton of fish. Chuck and wind. Throw that thing on a medium heavy to heavy action rod. Don't be afraid to give a beefier hook, and I throw it on heavier line, right? I'm fishing it real shallow, and I'm really setting the hook hard from a long distance. But throw the swim bait when you get wind in the spring, in the shallow bays, when they back out, pre-spawn, post-spawn, and they back out. Throw those swim baits in that 4 to 5 inch range. When you get that wind, you're going to catch a ton of fish in the springtime, and you're going to get some vicious bites at that. All right, number 5 bait that you've got to have in your arsenal for springtime fishing up in the Midwest has got to be a bladed jig, or originally known as the chatterbait. My personal favorite one is the Z-Man Custom Chatterbait. That's what they call it. It's got a 4/0 hook in it and a black blade. It's money. I mean, the hook is strong, it's the right size, it's got the right action, it's an instant kick, but it's a super easy bait to fish. cast it out there, slow reel that thing back, and try to catch the tops of the grass and pop that thing out of the grass. And when you pop it out of the grass, that's when the bass eat it. And I catch some of my biggest fish on a chatterbait in the springtime. And it's very similar to the swim bait, right? It's kind of a 1-2 punch. When I get a little bit dirtier water or I have more clouds, that's when I go to the chatterbait. Or I get more grass in the area, more wood. When I have more cover for them to hide on, is when I go to the chatterbait as opposed to the swim bait. So a little bit dirtier water, I've got more wind, or I've got more cover, more of anything, and I want something to come through clean, I go to the chatterbait. And you'd be surprised how easy that thing comes through grass and overlogs. It's one of the best baits for that. Just chuck and wind, real similar to a spinnerbait, but I think it outshines a spinnerbait when it comes to big fish and getting bites. And my favorite trailer are these Lake Fork Magic Shad style trailers. The jointed swim baits with that kicker tail, I think they just get so many more bites than any other trailer. A lot of guys throw the paddle tail style. I personally don't like those. Luke throws a lot of those. I love in a standby these jointed style trailers. They just have a really tight bait fishy action coming through the water that really matches up well with that blade. But it's the same concept, right? You're just taking that trailer and going straight up the bait with it, popping it on the keeper, and there you go. You've got an amazing bluegill or baitfish profile. And there's times where this can even imitate a crawfish at times too. But it is such a bait that just catches fish, man. For a chatterbait, for me, it's green pumpkins all the way. Especially up here in Minnesota and the Midwest. It represents a bluegill better than anything, I think. And I always go green pumpkin. It gets so many more bites for me, especially here in the Midwest and Minnesota. But this is just a green pumpkin blue color. I paired up with a nice green pumpkin trailer. But if you're going to get some chatterbait, start with that Z-Man Custom and get yourself some of those Lake Fork Magic Shad trailers and just go green pumpkin on green pumpkin and you're going to start catching fish on it. In recent years, you'll see a lot of the pros are throwing the Z-Man Evergreen Combo Jackhammer. And I haven't thrown these yet. I got these this winter, but I can tell you by looking at it, it's got the same style blade as that Custom, but they put more detail into it. The head is more detailed. The skirts are really nice material. They're hand tied on there. Looks like it's got a little bit stronger hook. So I can tell you this is going to catch fish, and these are just a more detailed version of that chatterbait Custom. But get yourself a couple of those, pair it up with those Lake Fork Magic Shad trailers, or any of that style trailer. Gary Yamamoto's got that Zacco trailer. Whoop, we dropped one. The Zacco trailer. What you're looking for is that jointed swim bait, and just the jointed swim bait trailer, just match up the color with the chatterbait you're throwing. If there's a lot of shad in your area and you know there's a ton of them, go to a white one and match it up with a whitish baitfish colored trailer, something white and chartreuse, white and clear. But for me in the Midwest and Minnesota, you've got to go green pumpkin, represent a bluegill, and throw a green pumpkin with an accent color like a blue, and you're going to catch a ton of big fish in the spring on those chatterbaits when you get around grass. And last but not least, this is probably the most fun bait to throw in the spring because it's a topwater, and everyone knows getting blown up on topwater is second to none. And it's got to be a walk the dog style bait. For me specifically, a Super Spook Junior is just the money bait. Year in and year out, that bait has stood the test of time and just gets bit. This bait shines in the post spawn. The water's got to be above 60 degrees. Once it hits 60 degrees, I have the topwater tied on. And there's just certain times when this bait catches bigger and more fish and the bites are explosive, especially in post spawn. A couple of the bays that Luke and I use this thing in the springtime up in Minnesota is grassy bays, similar areas where I'm throwing the swim bait, identical areas, but when I get a lot of overcast, and if I can get some rain, some of that classic spring rain, you will have your best day of fishing of the year on a spook, on top water, in the rain, in the springtime. I don't know what it is that fish are looking up to feed, and it is just amazing how good that thing works. And you're just walking the dog, pop, reel, pop, reel, pop, reel. Just get that steady side-to-side cadence, right? And as you get better and better, you can work it fast and stop it, work it fast and stop it, and play around with the jerks and stops. But when you start, if you can just get used to doing a steady pop, reel, pop, reel, pop, reel, and just get that bait to do this, right? That's how you start. Fish are going to eat it while it's walking, and once you get better, you're going to learn to put those pauses in there and get going. But the key is pop and slack, real similar to a jerkbait, and getting that bait to dance side to side. And one thing I really like about the Super Spook Junior is it's, I don't know if you can hear that, but really nice one-knocker rattle, and it calls fish from a really long distance. And a little trick that I will recommend to you guys is always upgrade your hooks on a topwater. Make sure that you always attach them with split rings. Some baits don't come without them. Attach split rings if they don't come with it. But upgrade your hooks to nice quality hooks. And I really like to put a feathered treble on the back of a walk the dog bait. I think it just gives them a target. I think it looks like, sometimes it looks like just a little tail action of a fin kicking. And I think sometimes it could even look like two bait fish moving together. But more than anything, I think it just gives them that needed, you know, secondary action to come in and really commit to the bait and eat it well. Color, I don't get too specific on color on a walking bait. Go to something with silver and black. This one you can see is just a classic silver black, and it's actually chipped. I've caught so many fish on this. I've had this bait for probably 5-6 years and loaded the boat with fish on that. But silver and blacks, your ghost colors. Here's another one with a ghost color if you're in really clear water. Or you can go with something really vibrant if you get real dirty water and go to your chartreuse's bluegill patterns. But I love that feathered treble. Walk that bait steady. And this, along with the jerkbait, is going to be a very technique-specific rod for me. It's got to be a medium action rod again. I like about a 6.5 to 7 foot because you're keeping that thing walking. And I really like to throw it on a braid. I like to throw it on a really light braid because you can bomb it out there. You get a really good hook set. And you can reel set them and pull into them. But it's a great deadly combination. You've got to have it for certain specific occasions. When it gets cloudy, when it gets windy, when it gets rainy. That's when it shines, or even when you're target casting around tight cover, down the edge of a dock, right next to some wood, over a brush pile, over a grass line. But throw that bait in your arsenal. That's the Sweet 6. You got to throw the Sweet 6. Shines in Minnesota for me and my brother Luke. Really good Midwest baits. I've even caught fish on these baits down in Texas multiple times. But I'm telling you guys, use these baits in the spring. Season's about to open up. It's not too far away. I hope this helps you guys catch more fish. Try this stuff out. Comment down below. Let me know some of your favorite spring baits. I'd love to learn some more lures. We're probably missing a ton. We're tackle junkies just like you. We love to hear from you. Give this video a like if it helped you catch more fish. Comment down below on some of your favorite spring baits. Hey, we hope to see you guys out on the water here in Minnesota. Spring is not far away. Bass Predator TV. Stay tuned.